I always found driving at night to be the calmest time of my day. No traffic, no noise, just the roar of the engine and the gentle rocking of the bus moving through the darkness. It was almost therapeutic. Line 377 was one of the most forgotten in the city. It cut through empty neighborhoods and ended at the top of a hill where, they say, there was an old, deactivated hospital. A silent, mechanical journey. But that night, something felt different. The silence was not the same. Wait, it was as if the air inside the bus was thicker, as if every sigh was heard, as if my thoughts were no longer just my own. There was something, or someone, there. Something that my eyes couldn't see, but my skin felt. From the moment I turned the key in the ignition, I had the feeling I wasn't alone. I looked in the mirrors a few times, as if looking for a rational explanation for a sudden chill. Nothing. The benches were empty, but the sense of presence was almost palpable. The panel's reflection danced on the front glass, casting shadows that seemed to move a little further than expected. I thought I was tired, maybe stressed, but that anguish didn't seem to come from me. It was as if the bus itself was carrying a secret. And that night, he was about to reveal it. The first stop was silent. Nobody entered. Everything normal. But the sound of the pneumatic doors opening echoed like a dull crack inside the bus. I found myself looking too much at the deserted street, waiting for someone to come up. Nobody came. When I closed the door and resumed my journey, I heard a click behind me. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Nothing. Just the empty benches illuminated by the dim light from the ceiling. But even so, something inside me said there was one more passenger on that bus, and he didn't need a ticket to enter. I forced myself to laugh, to shake my shoulders as if trying to shake off a silly thought. But the chill in my spine didn't go away. The second stop came faster than I remembered. Maybe he was accelerating without realizing it. This time, someone went up. A man. Tall, stooped, with a heavy coat and a low cap that hid his face. He didn't say anything. He didn't look at me. He went straight past and went to the back of the bus. Silence dominated again. The engine seemed noisier now. The presence of that man, or perhaps the lack of any sound coming from him, made the air strange. I tried to look in the mirror, but it was covered in shadows. I couldn't see his face, or even know if anyone was really there, and somehow that was even worse than being alone. I kept driving, but everything seemed distorted, as if the usual route had taken on curves that didn't exist before. The clock on the dashboard, which always marked the minutes accurately, now trembled in its digits. The fuel gauge went down little by little, even for no reason. And, behind me, that silence remained firm. There was no request to stop, no sound of movement, just the subtle creak of the suspension, as if the back seat supported a body that never moved. I wanted to ask if everything was okay, but my voice trailed off. It was as if the bus had crossed an invisible line, a boundary between what was routine and what should never happen. The internal mirror reflected only shadows. I tried not to look, but it was impossible. With each passing minute, my curiosity increased along with the discomfort. The road seemed narrower, as if the trees on the sides were getting closer, trying to choke the path. But what really made me uneasy was the silence behind me. No movement, no coughing, not even a clearing of the throat. The absence of sound was so absolute that the faint ringing in my own ears began to bother me. That figure back there didn't look alive, or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe she was more alive than any of us should ever be. At one point, I swear I saw the reflection of the bench sink slightly. Not because of the weight of a body, but as if something was moving there, a kind of slow, irregular pulse. I forced myself not to look again. My heart was racing, but I couldn't show fear. After all, it could just be a strange passenger. someone exhausted, a wanderer, a homeless person, I don't know. But even though I tried to rationalize it, something in me knew. He didn't come in like the others. He didn't pay the ticket. He didn't go up with steps. He was there. As if it had appeared out of nowhere, as if it had always been there and only now did my eyes notice it. I thought about stopping the bus, ask him to come down, inventing that the itinerary ended right there. But when my hand touched the button to open the door, I felt something strange. The air became thicker. The internal light flickered, blinking twice as if warning. It was enough to freeze me. The idea of facing him, of getting closer, was absurd. It was like trying to talk to a storm. At that moment, I understood. Something that chilled my bones. He didn't want to leave. He expected to arrive. And it wasn't to the end of the line, it was beyond. A destiny that neither I nor this world seemed to recognize. I continued driving in silence, paying attention to every detail on the road. The signs seemed less frequent, and the ones I could read had names I'd never seen before, as if that route had changed without me noticing. The radio chirped briefly, emitting a low, almost human noise. I hurried to turn it off. I looked in the mirror once again. Nothing, or better, all, because the bank was still sunk, and I felt that his eyes were fixed on the back of my head. Even without seeing him, even without sound, it was as if he was reading my every thought, waiting for the right moment to act. That's when I realized there was no stop order, no signal, no intention of descending, and that made me even more distressed. Because every passenger, no matter how strange, has a destination. But that man, or the thing sitting in the back, seemed to have the same fate as me. And that meant two things. Either I was going to take him where he wanted, or I was going to find out that he was already taking me. The route of line 377 has always been clear to me. He knew every curve, every broken traffic light, every hole in the road. But something about that night was off. I started to notice that the landmarks were disappearing one by one. The newspaper stand on the corner wasn't there. The 24-hour pharmacy with that pulsating blue sign had become an empty lot, as if the world was being erased behind me. I looked at the dashboard to distract myself. The digital clock was shaking, flashing the numbers 0.0, as if it had stuck in time. The GPS wasn't loading anything, no map, no route, just a red dot. Motionless, as if I had stopped being anywhere I knew. The radio chirped from time to time by itself, even when it was turned off. Short, static noises, and at times, something like muffled voices, voices that seemed to whisper my name. The first time I heard it, I thought it was all in my head. The second, I stopped the bus. Total silence. No cars on the track, not a living soul in sight. I looked back, just out of reflex, and there he was, in the background, now clearer than before, still covered by the heavy coat, but with his head slightly tilted, as if he was watching me, as if he knew I was finally listening, and that only made everything worse. The interior light flickered, casting long shadows down the bus corridors. Some of these shadows seemed to move, even when everything was still. It was as if the vehicle itself was breathing, exuding a presence that wasn't coming from me. I started to hear creaks on the ceiling, as if someone was walking on the bus, but there was no one there. The road ahead no longer looked familiar. It was like I was driving in circles, even with the steering wheel firmly in my hands. Each turn took me back to the same one, a silent, suffocating, endless loop. I thought about calling the center, ask for help, fake a mechanical failure, but the radio only returned a low, intermittent hiss, as if it were censoring me. I picked up the cell phone. No signal, 0 bars. And then something even more unsettling happened. The streetlights on the side of the road began to go out one by one, as if the night was swallowing me, as if the world behind me was ceasing to exist. And I couldn't stop, because somehow I felt that stopping would be much worse than continuing. It was then that I realized a terrifying truth, that Bus was no longer following a common route. He was going somewhere I didn't choose, and the worst part, I wasn't driving anymore. It was as if the steering wheel were just a prop, an illusion of control. I was just a passenger with the best view of the collapse. And behind me, that thing, that man, or whatever it was, remained still. But inside me, I knew he was the one who guided everything. After countless curves, the road finally opened up to a flatter stretch. The fog that previously appeared sporadically now covered everything. The bus's high beams barely cut through the dense white ahead. It was at that moment that the tires hit something metallic. A low, creaking sound echoed beneath the vehicle, as if we had crossed an old gate. Soon after, I saw the sign partially illuminated by the headlights. Ravena Institute. Restricted access. That didn't make sense. This place, I had already heard about it. An old sanatorium closed for decades, involved in rumors of mistreatment, disappearances, and forbidden experiments. But it was just a story. A story. Until that moment. The entrance was flanked by high walls, covered in dry ivy and dead branches. The gate, although rusty, was ajar as if someone knew I was coming. The strangest thing was, I didn't make any turns that would lead there. No path on line 377 passed through that road. And yet, there I was. The bus stopped on its own, literally. I didn't hit the brakes. The engine cut off with a sigh, and the interior lights failed one last time before going out completely. Only the headlights still illuminated the old building ahead, revealing broken windows, dangling doors, and a structure that seemed to be waiting for me. The silence was absolute. Even the wind had stopped. I looked in the rearview mirror with a courage I didn't recognize in myself. The back bench was still occupied. The motionless figure with his face hidden by shadows. But now something was different. There was a metallic shine over his lap, a key, as if he was offering me a path. It was at that moment that I heard the bus door open on its own. With that long, drawn-out squeak, the sound gave me goosebumps, and even with every instinct screaming at me not to move, I knew either I left or he would come and get me. I went down one step at a time. The bus stairs seemed longer than usual. Each step creaked, as if decades old. When I stepped onto the asphalt, I realized there was no sound around, no crickets, no wind, no life. Only the creak of the door closing behind me. The Ravena Institute stood before me like a living scar in the darkness. A structure that should never have been there. The smell was of rotting wood, rust, and hospital, as if they still lived inside, or how if had never left. For a moment I found myself standing there, looking at that building as if I were looking at something. Deeply familiar, as if I had been there before. But it wasn't a clear memory, it was more of an echo, a feeling of nauseating déjà vu. It was then that I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I turned around, and he was there, off the bus, stopped a few meters away. The face was still covered, but now, completely still. He didn't come any closer. He just raised his hand, as if pointing the way. And behind me, the main door of the Ravena Institute slowly opened. It was clear. I had arrived. The question was, why? I stood there, standing in front of the door of the Ravena Institute, not knowing what held me back more. The fear of entering, or the fact of knowing that, deep down, I already belonged to that place. I felt something vibrating in my pocket. I pulled out my cell phone, no signal. The screen flashed and froze with an image that froze my blood. An old photo of me, dressed in hospital clothes, handcuffed to a gurney. A code printed next to my name. My fingers started to shake. I tried to lock the screen, turn it off, anything, but the device turned off on its own, and when I looked again at the entrance to the sanatorium, he was gone. The figure that guided me, the passenger. I slowly turned my body and looked towards the bus. The headlights were still on, the engine running, but the cabin was empty. The bottom bank now no longer sank. The lights inside suddenly came back on, and a white fog began to fill the hallway. Everything indicated that it wasn't over yet. It was then that I heard footsteps, but they weren't coming from the bus. They were coming from inside the building. Barefoot, wet steps dragging across the tiled floor. With them, a voice echoed, low and ancient, as if from the depths of my own mind. "You've been here before, you just don't remember." My breathing became shallow. The air around me seemed to suck out what little lucidity I still had. I walked to the bus as a survival instinct, but stopped halfway. Something inside me said that going back wouldn't do any good. The road was now gone. There was no more world out there. Just the Institute, the bus, and me. I went to the side of the vehicle and touched the bodywork. It was hot, pulsating, as if the bus was breathing, as if he were alive. I looked at the reflection in the window and saw what shouldn't be there, the passenger, right behind me. But it was no longer shadow. It was a defined figure, and it had my face. I ran to the driver's seat, trying to turn on the radio, anything that would connect me to reality. The digital screen flashed again. 00000. The doors closed with a bang. The bus lurched slightly backwards, as if it had gone into gear of its own accord. But it didn't go. He remained motionless. I felt a weight on the passenger seat next to me, but I was alone, right? I looked out of the corner of my eye. Nobody, but the rearview mirror showed something else. Two people sitting in the back now. One of them was me. But not me now. Before. Today, every time the clock strikes midnight, I hear the sound of pneumatic doors opening somewhere in the garage. The bus appears there, even when it is not scheduled, with the engine hot, the headlights on, and the back seat always sunken. I can't say anymore if I came back from that night. I don't know if I was just a driver or the next passenger. I just know that the Ravena Institute was not my destiny. It was my origin. And now, it seems like I'm the one waiting for the next one to come up.